Okay, this will be a quick tutorial on how to bootstrap a VPS on AWS Lightsail when you want to use an SSH key format that Lightsail doesn't support. Let me explain what all that means. So first off, let's go ahead and get rid of this test instance and create a new Lightsail instance. So we're going to be using Ubuntu for this, the latest LTS. And here's the issue. You can deploy an SSH key pair. The way Lightsail works is you can't give it a default password to log in. You have to give it a key pair to log in. And you can generate your own, or you can upload your own, but AWS only supports RSA SSH keys. It doesn't support elliptic curve SSH keys, which are the ones that you get when you use this command, when you generate them in this format. And the upside to using this format is it's faster and it's more secure. So you may want to use that. There's no downside to using that, except that Amazon doesn't support it. And because the only way to access your new VPS is to SSH using the key pair that Amazon has in their website, you have to log in with one SSH key in order to set up the other SSH key. And we want to automate all of this. I'll be showing you how to do that today. So first, create your instance using whatever default SSH key pair you want. I have one called Bootstrap because I only use it to bootstrap servers. And then I switch to an elliptic curve SSH key pair. I'll pause the video and come back when this is spun up. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this Ansible playbook here. And you can see what we're doing. I'll get rid of my face. You can see what we're doing is we are running a role on one task, and then we are running another role on another machine. So we have one host with Lightsail Bootstrap and one host as main VPS. But if we look at my Ansible hosts file, you'll see these both go to the same IP, and this is an old IP for testing. So the new IP of this server is going to be this one. You want to take the IP of your VPS, and you want to create two entries in the etc Ansible hosts file, or whatever inventory file you use. And the first one is going to be the one that you use after you bootstrap it. And I just have mine called main VPS. I give it the IP, and these SSH arguments are not important for this video. It's for SSH key forwarding, key agent forwarding. Then the second entry is the exact same host, whatever other options you want. And then this is the important option here. You specify the private key file, which in this case is going to be that Bootstrap server private key that I mentioned earlier. And so what happens when you do this is Ansible thinks you're running tasks on two machines, but actually the first task you're running using the default SSH key pair. The second task you're running using the main VPS, or your elliptic curve SSH keys, whichever one you want. To walk through briefly what this is doing, I have gather facts set to false because it's not necessary for what I'm doing here, so it speeds it up. Ignore unreachable is very important because after you bootstrap, during your bootstrap process, you should probably disable the SSH keys that you never use, possibly even disable the default user, meaning that this Ansible playbook will fail. And so you want it to seamlessly skip and move on to the next one. You can even write it so that the first thing tries, and if it and add a when clause for every other task in this playbook, which will skip that task if the first one failed. I won't be doing that today, but that is something you can do if you want to make things faster. What is this first step doing? I'm just configuring a managed user. I'm executing a role that I wrote myself. If we go to my roles, configure managed user, it's just creating a user called Ansible with the passwords and the key files and the sudo access that I want, which is how I typically like to work with Ansible. And then after that, I'm running just another role as an example. In production, I have a playbook that does more, but in this example, all I'm doing is running another role, which cleans Ubuntu of packages and services that I don't use, which saves me a bit of RAM and processing power on this VPS. I'm removing things like Snap and multipath-D. Nothing against either of those services, but my particular use case for this VPS doesn't use them, and so I can reclaim that RAM. It's a RAM-constrained environment, so this is an example role that I typically run just to make my servers a little more efficient when I don't need those things that are running by default. Let's see. So to see what things look like normally, that is the wrong set of text. Let me log in to the VPS, telling it to use my default Bootstrap key. And we can see that we have about 156 megabytes of RAM used. So we'll use that as a benchmark. And then I will not, as you can see, be able to log in as the Ansible user from my Ansible control node, because permission denied public key. The Ansible user doesn't exist, doesn't have a key configured. We're going to set all that up using this Ansible playbook that I just demonstrated. So we'll run the test roll call. And first it's running the Bootstrap using the default Lightsail SSH keys. And now it's bootstrapped that, it's set up the Ansible user, and now it's connecting again using a different host entry as the Ansible user and running the commands to clean up the server of services and packages that I don't use. I'll pause and come back when it's done. Okay, one other thing of note about this role in particular is that it's actually configured to reboot the machine if some of these things change, because I unmounted a bunch of things, I stopped a bunch of services, I made a sufficient number of changes that the easiest way to reset everything is just to reboot the machine and make sure we start from a clean slate after we've bootstrapped the server, so that it'll be more stable when it's running in production. And there we are. It has finished rebooting. Man, AWS is really fast. The previous cloud provider I was working with did not reboot anywhere close to this fast. So to prove that it has changed, if we connect back in as the Ubuntu user, you'll see that we've saved about 60 megs of RAM, which is a decent amount when you only have 475 megabytes to use and you're going to be doing a lot on this VPS. And the other thing we can prove that changed is if I SSH as the Ansible user, it now works because all those changes were made. So that is how to bootstrap a VPS using AWS Lightsail when you want to use default SSH keys that aren't supported by AWS. And we did that by configuring two host entries in the host file, one to use the Bootstrap private key, and the other to use our normal private key, which all future Ansible playbooks run against this server will use.